Horsepower Techs and Speedtrap Consulting have teamed up to create a fantastic new unit for 2016. And as bold as it may sound, this unit may very well be considered to be one of the most versatile turbochargers ever released for the Subaru stock location market. The concept is to create a stock location turbocharger that worked with both the 2.5-liter Subaru STI engines from 2004 to 2014 and the 2-liter WRX engines from 2002 to 2014, which includes the 2008 to 2014 WRX engine with some slight modifications. At the same time, this turbo still allows the use of simple bolt-on modifications from a variety of aftermarket companies to both the intake and exhaust system with no special adaptation intake tubes or special pipe routing. Most importantly, this turbo would still function properly while retaining AVCS and keep itself as visually low-key as possible while still creating gains in the right areas of the power band of both engines. The team looked upon the very popular VF39 turbocharger and the Mitsubishi 16G compressor wheel upgrades to the TD04 compressor cover that were used on many stock WRX 2-liter engine platforms from years past as its source of inspiration. So what makes this particular turbocharger different? The focus is what makes this different, and the focus for this unit is not simply about creating more power. Many current aftermarket stock location turbo manufacturers make units that easily make more peak power than the stock unit. But two main problems arise in that quest and the competition for making turbos that focus on top-end peak power in an all-wheel drive platform. First, much of the evidence of the capabilities of those units by those manufacturers are always held under a high scrutiny by both other manufacturers of turbochargers and fellow enthusiasts alike, and it gets up to the point where the end user's needs are lost within all of the chaos. Second, they understood that the market was already saturated with lower-end aftermarket stock location upgrades that borrow designs from manufacturers who never intended for that wheel and turbine shaft combination to fit into the smaller TD04 and TD05 housings. One can easily modify wheel and turbine combinations to fit into these housings for stock location, but don't always take into account significant factors that can lead to undesired results down the road, such as wheel mismatch, back pressure issues, accessories being able to fit, etc. So the purpose of this is more than just twofold. It's to maximize the quick response characteristics found in the VF39, 43, and 48 IHI turbochargers from the factory model, while both maximizing the EJ engine's core competency and keep the reliability that IHI turbochargers have a great reputation for. With the availability of well-kept, used, original VF39 and 48 series turbos at an all-time low, and new IHI original units being sold at premium prices, Speedtrap Consulting and Horsepower Techs knew that a winning combination platform could be created. So everyone is all aware that many owners not only utilize their Subaru WRX or STI just for a daily driver, but also for dual-purpose car for uses outside of its daily duties. However, many enthusiasts focus on peak power only, as stated before, such as drag racing events, quarter miles, stoplight to stoplight, etc. And they're using the same logic of other platforms from other cars as a guide, giving only some attention to the very behavior in which Subaru Boxer engines were designed for, which was large amounts of creation of torque at low RPM levels. This particular unit's purpose focuses on the idea of dual purpose, but it enhances the Boxer's characteristics to be used in two specific racing environments that truly reveal the advantage of the Boxer's capabilities. First, of course, is autocross racing, in which higher-end peak power is not utilized at all. And then secondly, small venued, organized high-performance driving events, or HPD events, on the circuit. During the event, the use of torque is more important than actual power outside of its RPM range when using these particular platforms. The owner wants to be able to go to that particular event, drive their race, and think that they're going to be as reliable as they did the day that they entered in. By the time the event has ended, that owner wants to be able to simply drive home and drive to work the next day with confidence and reliability that their turbocharger works just as good as it did before that event or time trial. If they need to go to the dealership for other maintenance needs, the technician at that dealership wouldn't take a second glance at the turbocharger under the hood because it is still of OEM complement. This means warranty retention and a lot less headache overall for the owner. So ultimately, this focus narrowed down onto the creation of this turbo to be an extremely aggressive response monster. By taking advantage of the EJ's ability to create more torque than power in its limited RPM range that the Subaru EJ20 and EJ25 variants exhibit, and perform what IHI would have made had they owned a division designed strictly for rally cars and FIA's World Rally Championship and then sell it to the public. Basically, we've created a turbo with a VF39 responsiveness and at the same time Mitsubishi 16G peak power capability and efficiency. In essence, the GOAT. But with this creation, there were some bright line guidelines that this turbo development had to follow for it to meet its goal. And one of them is that the turbo had to be IHI OEM based, so that the installation for either platform could be easy to install and tune for those that either had an upgraded intake and intercooler system, but still utilize the stock units if they had to. Second, the turbo needed to utilize stock OEM mounting hardware with an OEM look so as to not raise the eyebrows of any Subaru dealerships or technicians that the owner may encounter during the use of the car for double duty. Thirdly, the turbo needed a reliable base to start with. IHI was the original manufacturer of the factory units, so the team felt it was only paramount to stay with that tradition. And lastly, this turbo had to maximize cost efficiency without sacrificing quality of materials and yet still reach a wider variety of Subaru owner. No trendy knockoffs, wheel designs, or mismatched compressor and turbine wheel combinations were to be used. Normally we would go into our power level and characteristics, composition, specifications, price, etc. But for this particular one, we're going to be able to just list the power level and characteristics of this turbocharger, as well as the specifications just below on the comments section of the YouTube page. We're strictly going to talk about the composition and the internal wastegate. So for composition is very simple. It's still using the same IHI housing and cartridge combination, which means TDO4L extrude hone compressor cover with all the vacuum lines and fittings already mounted onto the turbo. It also still uses the same water lines as it would from the OEM, including the same size of the banjo bolts that are being used for the water fittings. That means that they're going to be using 14 millimeters on these sides. It also uses, though, a -4AN aluminum oil feed banjo bolt to integrate into the actual banjo hardline of most Subaru platforms. Check your user's manual to find out if this is actually going to be able to work for you before deciding. There may be some other changes that are necessary. But we also use the banjo bolt here and an oil feed line to be able to go into that hardline. Now, it does not come with the Woodward Machine inline oil filter, and we strongly suggest the use of an inline oil filter for any turbocharger platform you use. But it does allow the ease of the integration of an inline oil filter. This is, as we stated, an IHI cartridge with an 11-bladed turbine exhaust wheel from IHI. And it is a slightly modified turbine wheel that's capable of a bit more than the actual efficiency of the standard VF39. We decided also to stay with the 7-centimeter housing. There's no other adaptations, changes, or upgrades to this particular turbine housing because they're not necessary. Lastly, looking at the internal wastegate, it's a standard internal wastegate actuator from IHI using a 1-bar diaphragm and rod actuator that has no preload adjustment possibilities for the turbo. It goes and connects to itself to a 32mm flapper door, a 27mm opening that can actually be ported and changed if necessary, or this entire assembly can be removed to be able to go to an external wastegate if necessary. We feel that this is truly a GOAT, a greatest of all time that Muhammad Ali would actually agree with. But be able to find out for yourself. If there are questions, please email us at sales@Speedtrap Consulting. But more importantly, contact Horsepower Techs at hptex313@gmail.com. And of course, sales@speedtrapconsulting.com for any other further questions. Thanks and happy boosting.